Hello and welcome everyone to this week's episode of Inside the Publisher Lab. On this week's show of the Publisher Lab, we had Dr. Greg Starek with us. And so, Greg, I've got you again now. Welcome.
Good to be here.
So we talked about on the show a little bit about, kind of metrics that drive you crazy as a data scientist in the world of digital publishing. And CPMs and RPMs were one of those kind of numbers that came up. What is it that drives you crazy about CPMs and RPMs?
Yeah, I mean CPM is like an informative number, but CPM is a metric that's useful for advertisers, but not really for digital publishers. On the advertiser side, it makes sense because that's how much I'm going to spend at auction on this one impression. So it kind of catches on in the industry because of that. But as a digital publisher, I care less about how much one individual impression sold for, more than I care, or I care about that less than how much the actual visit was worth. So that's where EPMV comes into play.
So EPMV means earnings per thousand visitors. So what drives you crazy about CPMs and RPMs is that CPMs are looking at the total value of a single ad. RPMs are looking at the total value of all the ads on a single page. And what you're saying is that we should be looking at the total amount of revenue generated from a visit, right? Which is kind of taking into account all the ads, all the pages, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think of it like a grocery store. Like, do I care how much they paid for the gallon of milk, or do I care, like, what do I care about? I care about like the total shopping cart out the door, and that's sort of the EPMV, is like the whole session, the entire time, everything that was accumulated throughout that entire visit.
And so one of the things I think is always interesting, and this is something we brought up on the podcast, but it's that, as a publisher, you can increase your CPMs, you can increase your RPMs, but your total revenue from, the same number of visits could go down. But EPMV is that one metric that if it goes up or down, total revenue from the same number of visits is going to go up if it's going up.
Yeah, yes. CPM is easy to kind of manipulate. You can pump CPMs pretty easily, and then you can also sync CPMs pretty easily. But just because you have a high CPM, say on your top of page ad, that might be diluting ad spend throughout the entire visit. So you kind of want to think about just how do I maximize this whole visit? I got the person here on the page. I want them to go to the second page, and I want them to go to the third page, because there's more and more CPMs to be accumulated throughout that visit.
And one of the other things we talked about on the show relating to this topic was really how ad value is affected over time. And you had mentioned the idea that, lots of ads kind of can dilute each other, right? So you have, advertisers are bidding on, publisher ad space essentially, based on historically kind of the competition for those types of things. And so maybe explain to us a little bit more about kind of how that works, and how you take a long-term perspective on pricing your ad inventory.
Yeah. So if you have, I mentioned on the podcast, like you can like think one way to easily sort of manipulate CPM, or why chasing CPM can be bad, is if you put one ad on a page, that's going to go for a very high CPM. But then in terms of your total visit, one ad per page view is like really not going to be an optimal solution to maximizing the value of that visitor. So you can put more and more ads on, but the more and more, there's sort of this threshold where all of a sudden, okay, I'm putting too many ads on. And what happens is you are like decreasing the competition for bidders on your page, because you start to flood the page with ads. And then also like you're increasing, sort of like, you may get a click, but what the publishers or what the advertiser is going to see when they come visit your page is, okay, the click-through rate on all of these ads is really low, because one person, you got a click, but you had 15 ads on the page, so 14 ads got none, and then one got one. So actually all of those metrics that are sort of like behind the scenes and like actually then sort of baked into the CPM metric will ultimately over time start to go down.
And we mentioned it's a little bit like weight loss, how this stuff works, where you can make a change today, and although you may not see the results just then, those behaviors over time will accumulate. And if you're eating a lot of junk food, right, it's not like you gain 20 pounds overnight, but over the long term you may do it. The same can be said with exercise in the opposite direction, right?
Yeah, totally. So yeah, with EPMV, sort of what happens is, yeah, you may not see your CPMs budge at all, or your EPMV budge at all, but what will happen is over time You get that increased competition for bidding on your inventory because you have sort of the right number of ads on your page. CTRs start to go up sort of globally on that page and then throughout the session. And so that then starts, advertisers realize like, oh, actually, this is good traffic, this is like good inventory, and this is something that I want. So then the ad dollars, or the ad spend starts to go up because there's more and more competition.
So it's really this kind of like balance of supply and demand, right? You don't want, as you mentioned before, kind of one ad where it's like you've limited the supply so much that you really can't maximize the total value of the visitors. But then you also don't want to just flood the market to where the total value of everything on the page is not worth anything. So that's a pretty wide net to cast, right? So finding that balance in there is not always easy, but can be done with data, right?
Yeah, definitely. Then you really have to test, right? You can't just sort of say, well, 6 is a good number, so I'm just going to put 6 ads on the page. You really have to sort of A/B test it or do some like multivariate testing to like really look at, okay, what happens if I have 3 ads on this page versus 4 ads? And then say, okay, well, 4 increase my EPMV. Okay, well, what about 5? And you can start to budget, and then you like see like, okay, actually, there's some threshold where I'm getting diminishing returns by putting these ads on this page because EPMV will go down because people will start leaving. They say this is looks like a NASCAR car. I'm out of here. So
Well, excellent, Greg. Thanks for breaking some of that information down. I know we talked about it deeper on the podcast. If you're interested in learning more about this topic, you can catch Greg's episode. I believe it is episode either 58 or 59 on the Publisher Lab on iTunes, so you can catch it there. And then we also have a lot of great information at blog.ezoic.com that you can tap into. But thanks again, Greg, for joining us on Inside the Publisher Lab.